1987, deep beneath Moscow, Soviet radar operators trust their screens to catch any intruder within 400 kilometers. Then, a shimmering echo appears, then vanishes, leaving generals speechless. For the first time, America's stealth jets have rendered the Soviet Union's mighty air defenses powerless. If a single aircraft can turn the radar silent, what else could slip through undetected? The answer shattered everything the Soviets believed about the balance of power. A cold fluorescent glare washes over the bunker. The hum of old machinery fills the background, broken only by the steady click of analog dials and the low murmur of operators at their posts. Anatoly Krupnov leans over his console, eyes fixed on the green sweep of the main scope. For years, these screens have caught everything: bombers, reconnaissance flights, even stray flocks of birds. At 390 kilometers, a contact appears, not a solid echo, but a faint shimmer, a distortion that dances at the edge of the display. The signal is weak, barely above the noise floor, flickering for just a few seconds before it dissolves into static. Krupnov's hand freezes above the range dial. His assistant glances over, catching the uncertainty in his face. Routine protocol demands confirmation. Krupnov checks the adjacent S-band scope. Nothing but a blank sweep. He toggles to VHF. Another shimmer, this time even weaker, then gone. The scope's signal to noise ratio dips, then climbs again as if nothing had happened. On the other side of the bunker, sirens chirp, just a warning, not a full alarm. Krupnov's voice cuts through the noise. Possible contact, range 386 kilometers. Spectrum irregular. Operators scramble to cross-check. The Chelyabinsk 40 logbook, always open on the desk, records the time and bearing. A single entry reads, unidentified return, 386 kilometers, duration 4 seconds, radar cross-section below threshold, not reacquired. The annotation is careful, almost clinical, but the tension in the room is unmistakable. The Soviet doctrine promises that nothing can cross these rings unseen. Every radar on the network, P-18, Dnepr, S-200, S-300, is supposed to paint a clear, continuous track for anything larger than a missile. Yet the shimmer has no shape, no tail, no transponder code. It is there, then gone, like a trick of the scope. Krupnov checks the system health. All frequencies are green, no signs of electronic countermeasures, no atmospheric interference. The operators begin to whisper, is it electronic countermeasures? A malfunction? Birds do not move at 800 kilometers per hour. General Pavel Kutakov enters, his uniform crisp, his eyes sharp. He scans the log, then the faces of the crew. The expectation is clear, every anomaly must be explained, but there is no explanation. The Moscow ring's outer shell, designed to catch a B-52 at 400 kilometers, has just failed to hold a contact that barely registered at 386. The analog alarm resets, the echo is gone, and the bunker falls silent, except for the low whir of the radar's rotating dish. Krupnov stares at the scope, replaying the moment in his mind. The logbook is closed, the entry underlined. Later, technical staff will review the tapes, searching for a glitch or a missed calibration. But for now, the only evidence is a single transient echo, too small, too brief, too perfect to be anything they understand. The air is thick with unspoken questions. If the shield can be pierced by something no one can see, what else is out there, waiting beyond the edge of the screen? General Pavel Kutakov stands at the edge of the command floor, his presence enough to silence the room. The logbook sits open beside Anatoly Krupnov, its last entry still fresh. Operators watch for a cue, hands poised over their consoles. Kutakov's eyes move from the faint echo on the scope to the system status lights, every frequency green, every backup protocol in place. The doctrine is clear, unexplained contact, especially one that slips past the outer ring, must trigger a response. He gives the order without hesitation. His voice is low, clipped, yet unmistakable. Authorize intercept. Scramble Alert Group Priority 1. The words carry the full weight of PVO protocol. No one in the bunker questions the command. The shift supervisor relays the scramble code to Ramenskoye Air Base, where crews have trained for moments like this. MiG-31 Foxhounds, the fastest interceptors in the Soviet arsenal, stand ready on the tarmac. Within seconds, the alert klaxon sounds. Pilots race to their aircraft. Engines roar to life, afterburners lighting up the night as the first pair of MiGs roll towards the runway. Inside the bunker, the radar chief initiates the A-135 anti-air system tracking routines. Operators attempt to reacquire the contact on every available band: X-band, S-band, VHF, and UHF. The protocols are methodical. Each frequency is swept, each sector logged. The Chelyabinsk 40 complex, responsible for the sector, confirms that their VHF array registers only background noise. The S-band shows nothing but static. The A-135 ballistic track correlation algorithm, designed to predict missile arcs, finds no pattern to match. The system logs a track loss at 386 kilometers for 4 seconds radar cross-section below threshold. The entry is flagged for immediate review. Kutakov stands unmoving, hands clasped behind his back. His staff knows the implications. If the radar network cannot hold a contact, the entire defense doctrine is at risk. He asks for confirmation. Is there any sign of electronic countermeasures? Are the atmospheric conditions anomalous? The responses come back negative. The data is clean. There is no evidence of electronic countermeasures, no technical error, no weather event to explain the disappearance. The only answer is the one no one wants to say aloud. The radar shield has been pierced by something it cannot see. A 135 command attempts to bring SA-5 Gammon and SA-10 Grumble batteries to readiness. The missile crews run through lock-on procedures, feeding the last known vector into the guidance systems. The engagement radars sweep the sky, searching for a return above the minimum launch threshold. The screens remain empty. The system records no lock achieved. The launch keys remain untouched. The interceptors climb through the overcast, scanning for any visual sign of an intruder. Their radars, built to hunt bombers at Mach 2, report only silence. The radio net crackles with frustration. No contact, no track, no visual. In the bunker, Kutakov's authority is absolute, but even he cannot command a ghost to appear. He orders a full technical review. Every log, every tape, every system readout will be examined line by line. The operators know what this means. The entire chain of detection, from first echo to final loss, will be dissected for answers. Yet the evidence is already clear. The shield that guarded Moscow for decades has shown a crack, and no one can say how wide it might be. The silence stretches. Kutakov glances at the duty roster, then at the closed logbook. He says nothing more. The only sound is the whir of the radar dish turning on its axis, searching for a target that has already vanished. In the late 1960s, a stack of dense equations sat largely ignored in a Moscow technical library. They were the work of Pyotr Ufimtsev, a Soviet physicist who had mapped how electromagnetic waves scatter off simple shapes, edges, corners, and flat plates. Soviet defense planners read the papers, filed them away, and moved on. But halfway around the world, at Lockheed Skunk Works in California, those same formulas would open a door no one else could see. Mathematics. Kelly Johnson, the legendary engineer behind the U-2 and the SR-71, had built his career on speed and altitude. By the early 1970s, speed alone was no longer enough. American bombers and reconnaissance planes were tracked by ever more sophisticated Soviet radar. Something new was needed, something that could slip past the shield rather than outrun it. Johnson's successor, Ben Rich, saw the answer in Ufimtsev's math. If radar returns could be predicted, they could be minimized, not by making an airplane faster, but by making it nearly invisible. Speed. The Skunk Works team began with models, wooden shapes coated with black paint, tested under radar beams in a secret hangar. The results were promising, but the real leap came with a project called Have Blue. The design was radical, a collection of flat, angular panels, each calculated to deflect radar energy away from its source. It looked nothing like a conventional aircraft. Aerodynamicists were skeptical, and some called it a flying mistake, but Ben Rich and his engineers pressed ahead, convinced the math would win. Have Blue. Secrecy was absolute. The first Have Blue prototype took shape at Area 51 deep in the Nevada desert. Every component and every test flight was hidden from prying eyes. Even within the Air Force, few knew what was being built. The team worked around the clock, refining faceted surfaces, applying layers of radar-absorbent material, and running endless calculations on computers that filled entire rooms. Their goal was to reduce the radar cross-section to something smaller than a bird, a target so faint it would vanish into background noise. Invisible. In December 1977, Have Blue lifted off for its maiden flight. The test pilot, Bill Park, guided the strange angular craft down the runway and into the cold desert sky. Radar operators at the range watched their screens. Where a B-52 would have painted a bright, unmistakable arc, Have Blue barely registered, a faint, fleeting blip gone almost as soon as it appeared. Engineers measured the returns. In the X-band, the prototype's radar cross-section was less than 1/1000th of a square meter. To a Soviet radar, it would look like a metal marble flying at jet speed. Results. By 1978, the Have Blue program had logged dozens of flights. Each sortie brought refinements, new coatings, sharper angles, and tweaks to the flight control system. The airplane was difficult to fly, but the radar data was undeniable. The concept worked. Lockheed engineers had turned Ufimtsev's theory into metal, and the result was a jet that could slip past the most powerful radars in the world. Proof. Ben Rich kept the pressure on. He knew the Soviets were investing in bigger, more sensitive radar arrays, but nothing in their arsenal could track an object so elusive. The team's work remained cloaked in secrecy, and every breakthrough was classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people at the Pentagon and CIA Director William Casey saw the full scope of what was happening in the Nevada desert. Secrecy. In the years that followed, the Have Blue prototype gave way to an operational design, the F-117. But the leap had already been made. What began as a set of equations in a Soviet journal had become the foundation of a weapon the world had never seen before. The mathematics of invisibility, ignored at home, had crossed oceans and borders, been reshaped and built in steel and composite by a handful of engineers convinced the impossible could be real. Breakthrough. A radar pulse races outward, searching for a reflection. When it meets the F-117, almost nothing bounces back. The secret is geometry and chemistry. The jet's skin is a patchwork of flat, sharply angled panels, each one calculated to scatter radar energy away from its source. Where a traditional fighter's curved surface acts like a signal mirror, the F-117's facets break the beam, sending it off in directions the radar never sees. The result is a return so faint it is lost in the background, even to the most sensitive Soviet receivers. Radar cross-section, RCS, measures how large an object appears to radar. For a MiG-31, the RCS is 3 to 10 square meters. A B-52 bomber shows more than 100 square meters. But at the Ratscat range, the F-117's RCS in the X-band drops to 0.001 to 0.01 square meters. To Soviet radar, the jet is no bigger than a metal marble, even at altitudes between 5,300 and 7,600 meters. These numbers are not theoretical. Ratscat instruments logged the data as the jet rotated through every angle, plotting a signature curve that never rises above 0.01 square meters. Altitude sharpens the effect. At 6,000 to 7,000 meters, the F-117 signature stays pinned to the lowest end of the scale. The radar-absorbent material that coats the jet's surface works in tandem with the faceted design. RAM does not block radar outright, it absorbs energy, converting it to heat or scattering it as static. Soviet engineers, running their own tests, found that even at maximum power, their S-band and X-band arrays could not extract a stable return. Only the lowest frequency VHF sets, with their broad, imprecise beams, sometimes caught a fleeting shimmer, never enough for a target lock, never enough for a missile to track. Frequency is everything. The F-117 was built to defeat the radar bands most vital to Soviet missile guidance X and S bands between 2 and 12 GHz. At these frequencies, the combination of facets and the radar-absorbent material is devastating. Soviet technicians swept through the spectrum and found that at higher frequencies, the jet simply vanished. At lower frequencies, VHF and UHF, the returns were slightly stronger, but still far below actionable levels. For Soviet missile crews, this meant no firing solution. Without a solid return, launch keys stayed untouched. Ratscat polar plots reveal the truth. Nose on, the F-117's return is just 0.001 square meters. At 30 degrees or 60 degrees off axis, it rises only to 0.01. Even broadside, the jet's largest signature, the number is a fraction of what a MiG or bomber would show. Soviet radar equations, designed for targets hundreds of times larger, simply cannot resolve something this small at range. The detection ring, so reliable against every known aircraft, is pierced by a shape that mathematically refuses to be seen. The technology is exacting. Every panel, every seam, every edge must be perfect. Lockheed engineers spent years tuning angles, layering radar-absorbent coatings, and mapping every possible reflection. The result is not invisibility, but a practical vanishing act, an object that, for all practical purposes, does not exist on the screen. Soviet doctrine assumed radar would always reveal the truth, but the numbers tell a different story. At altitude, in the right profile, the F-117's radar return is not just small, it is, for the first time, smaller than the ambient noise itself. Chelyabinsk's 40, deep in the Urals, carried its own rhythms, rotating antenna arrays, the drone of cooling fans, the scratch of pen on logbook paper. In 1984, a shift led by Anatoly Krupnov began to notice something that did not fit. It was not a full contact. A Tu-95 would fill the screen, a U-2 would leave a distinct arc. This was a brief low-amplitude spark, flickering on the X-band at 378 kilometers, then vanishing. The logbook for that night, later catalogued as Fond 18601, Opus 5, Dilo 304, records the event in careful script. Unidentified contact, radar cross-section below threshold, duration 3 seconds. Operators followed protocol. Adjacent sector radars were queried, and there was no confirmation. The VHF array, designed for early warning, returned only background noise. The S-band, tuned for missile tracking, showed nothing at all. Krupnov annotated the entry that the return signature resembled a theoretical low-radar cross-section target and recommended transmission to the Central Technical Commission. The page was flagged and copied, then filed away with dozens of other routine anomalies. No alert was issued, no interceptors scrambled. The logbook closed, the shift changed, and the day's work faded into the archive. Over the next 2 years, similar entries appeared. Autumn 1985, spring 1986. Each time the pattern repeated, a single weak blip detected at ranges between 376 and 389 kilometers, lasting no more than 5 seconds. No secondary confirmation, no atmospheric disturbance, no known aircraft in the area. The annotation grew more pointed: possible electronic countermeasures, technical malfunction, recommend technical review. Yet each incident was treated as an outlier. The radar software, built to filter out noise, flagged and suppressed these returns. Soviet doctrine insisted that anything so small and fleeting could not be real. The logs were bundled with routine reports and sent to Moscow, where they joined thousands of other pages, most never read in detail. Years later, technical historians would call these the first hard clues. The original Chelyabinsk 40 logs, still stored in TSAMO, show the same pattern: weak transient contacts, each annotated by Krupnov or his deputies, each dismissed as clutter or possible jamming. In interviews, former operators described the frustration, knowing something was there but unable to prove it. One operator later recalled that they had built radars that could see a bird at 400 kilometers. Yet that night, there was something the size of a hummingbird, there and gone faster than anything known. No one in 1986 could say for certain what they had seen, but the evidence was there, buried in the logs. A handful of echoes, each too brief and too faint to fit the models, each quietly challenging the certainty of Soviet air defense. The institutional response was silence. When the Central Technical Commission finally reviewed the data, their memo concluded, "No actionable anomaly, continue standard monitoring." The warning signs were missed, not for lack of evidence, but for lack of belief that the impossible could be real. In February 1986, a classified memorandum circulated through the PV Ostrani's research offices. The document, stamped for immediate review, described a new approach to the growing problem of radar invisibility: exploit the lowest frequencies, VHF and below, where traditional stealth shaping and radar-absorbent materials were least effective. Kamchatka's early warning stations, perched on the edge of the Pacific, became the testing ground. Their VHF arrays, massive and ungainly compared to the sleek S-band dishes, swept the sky with broad, imprecise beams. The hope was simple: if American jets could slip past the sharp eyes of high-frequency radar, perhaps the old blunt tools could catch what the new ones missed. By spring, engineers at Kamchatka and Chelyabinsk 40 were logging every anomaly. The returns were inconsistent. Sometimes a faint shimmer at 370 kilometers, sometimes nothing but static. Internal PVO memos from April 1986 recorded sporadic echo in the VHF band with duration 2 to 4 seconds and no S-band confirmation. Each entry was reviewed by technical staff, then bundled for transmission to Moscow. The Central Technical Commission, led by senior officers and civilian scientists, debated the findings. Some argued the echoes were atmospheric, others blamed algorithmic noise. The logs grew thicker, but the evidence stayed thin. In May, a second memo from the Kamchatka station chief recommended a limited deployment of bistatic radar experiments. By separating transmitters and receivers by dozens of kilometers, the theory went, it might be possible to catch stealth aircraft from an angle they could not predict or evade. Test runs were scheduled for late summer. The results, according to the Research and Development Summary, were inconclusive. Detection range improved for large targets, but low RCS contacts remained intermittent and non-actionable. The leadership in Moscow, including KGB chairman Yuri Andropov, received regular briefings on these developments. At a Politburo session in late 1985, Andropov summarized the dilemma. He said, "The Americans have created a regime where our radars, the foundation of our defense, may no longer see what approaches." He said, "We must consider that invisibility in the radar spectrum is now a real threat." The phrase was recorded in the meeting minutes and then echoed in policy discussions throughout the year. Despite the cautious optimism among some engineers, the institutional response was restrained. The 1986 PVO Research and Development Memorandum acknowledged partial success in detecting low RCS objects with VHF, but warned that the signal-to-noise ratio was too low for reliable tracking or engagement. The document concluded that further improvements were required and current systems were insufficient for actionable defense. Throughout the summer and autumn, Kamchatka's VHF logs continued to capture the occasional shimmer, each one tagged and filed. No interceptor was ever scrambled on the basis of these returns. The data offered hope, but not certainty. For every brief echo, there were hours of silence. The doctrine that radar would always reveal the truth had been shaken, but not yet replaced. In the end, the reports from the edge of the empire landed on the desks of generals and scientists who understood the stakes but could offer no immediate solution. Inside the bunker, the talk turned from technical troubleshooting to fundamental questions about the future of air defense. The shield was still in place, but now everyone knew it was no longer solid. The search for answers would continue, but the confidence of the past was gone, replaced by a quiet, persistent doubt that even the most powerful radar could be blinded by something as simple as silence. A digital clock on the bunker wall ticks past 2:13 a.m. The radar floor is a hive of motion. Operators are hunched at their stations, voices clipped and urgent. A technician at the north console shouts, "Contact Sector 7, range 384 kilometers. Every head turns. On the main scope, a single pale blip flickers at 384 kilometers. It hangs for less than 3 seconds, then vanishes. The operator toggles through frequency bands, hands shaking. No return, no secondary. MiG-31s launch into the darkness, afterburners flaring as they climb to intercept. Pilots, eyes fixed on the Zaslon radar, wait for a sign, any sign of the intruder. The Zaslon, with its phased array antenna, can spot bombers at 200 kilometers and track cruise missiles at Mach 3. Tonight, its screens show nothing. The lead pilot radios in. No contact. Zaslon clean. Request new vector. On the ground, Ramenskoye's flight director relays new data. Bearing, altitude, speed. The numbers do not add up. The last radar shimmer was at 371 kilometers, but the track jumps, skipping sectors in a way no aircraft should. Pilots adjust heading, throttle wide open. At Mach 2.8, the Foxhounds are the fastest interceptors in the Soviet arsenal, but they are chasing a ghost. Missile crews at the perimeter stand ready. The SA-5 Gammon, with its massive engagement radar, and the newer SA-10 Grumble, built to catch even low-flying cruise missiles, sweep the sky for a lock. Their radars scan the predicted path, feeding data to guidance computers. The launch consoles remain blank. Without a stable echo above the minimum radar cross-section threshold, the system will not allow a shot. Crews wait, hands over keys, as guidance routines cycle through failed acquisition after failed acquisition. Inside the MiG-31 cockpits, frustration grows. Instruments show only background noise. One pilot, later debriefed at Ramenskoye, remembers that they were at altitude, radar on full gain. Nothing, not a trace. It was as if the sky had swallowed the target. The Zaslon, with its multi-target tracking and look-down and shoot-down capability, was supposed to be the answer to any American threat. But tonight, it offers nothing. Pilots switch to visual search, scanning the darkness for a glint of lights or a silhouette. There is nothing. The bunker relays new vectors as the anomaly flickers back, now nearly 20 kilometers from the last return. The bearing is off, the speed beyond what the system can reconcile. The log records the words non-ballistic trajectory, track lost. Kutakov listens to the radio net, negative reports, no visual, no radar lock, no engagement possible. Technical staff cross-check every frequency. The A-135 command runs diagnostics. All systems are green. Missile batteries cycle through lock-on again, feeding the last coordinates into fire control. Screens stay blank. The engagement radars, optimized for X-band and S-band, cannot extract a strong enough return. The minimum radar cross-section for a firing solution is not met. Launch keys stay dormant. As interceptors burn fuel, the operation stalls. MiG-31s are ordered to orbit and wait. The frustration in their voices is clear. They say, "We are blind, no contact, returning to base." The radio falls silent, broken only by routine acknowledgements and static. Afterward, the duty log at Ramenskoye is terse. Alert scramble, no contact established, no lock achieved. Recommend technical review. Bunker staff replay tapes, analyze radar data, search for a clue, but the evidence is clear. The most advanced interceptors, the most powerful missile systems, and the densest radar network have all failed. A new kind of aircraft has made the old playbook obsolete. The shield is no longer cracked, it is transparent. Stealth technology shattered the certainty of radar, redrawing the boundaries of military power. Today, as nations race to develop ever more elusive aircraft and countermeasures, the invisible battlefield grows only more complex. Modern conflicts still hinge on who controls the unseen. In a world where detection can mean destruction, true security is never guaranteed, only contested. Thanks for watching. What does the future of invisibility mean to you? Let us know in the comments.